Steph, can I jump in just to start the conversation with a good question? Well, I think it's a good question. Especially on the creative side, they look at marketers and they go, oh, the coloring department, here they come again. Here's people who come and make stuff pretty. So where do you start with that kind of, I guess, opposition?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think the onus is on creatives, marketers to learn the language of CFOs. It's of finance. It's unlikely that they're going to learn our language, but learning theirs, well, maybe not intuitive or take some practice. When you can start to talk to finance about things like enterprise value or margin resiliency or, um, you know, risk mitigation, their ears perk up, and all of a sudden they have a framework that allows them to understand the work that you're doing. So my experience has been the more you can learn to speak their language and understand their perception on the business, they're much more likely to hear what you have to say, like what comes next.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. But still, there's this idea, I think, around, like, do people, maybe I shouldn't assume, do people appreciate that kind of approach coming from an agency partner who's talking about creative, or do they still dismiss kind of your position because they just have you already boxed into that corner? They put baby in the corner and talk about it being like, you guys are the creative people that don't really know anything. Let the adults handle the real work.
Yeah. I think, there are times where that is the vibe, and I think those conversations end pretty quickly.
Mm.
To me, the reality is you cannot be a sophisticated business and not use brand as one of the tools. Like, you can get to a certain level of revenue without understanding and managing brand. Like, maybe you can be a $20 million business. When you start thinking like, oh, I'm going to be a $200 million business, or I'm going to be a $2 billion business, you are having to contemplate brand. And there's just different levels of sophistication there. So the bigger the organization, usually my experience is they're starting to have some awareness of the impact that can have. And, it's, if we talk about our work as, oh, I just like this direction better. I really love the way these colors work together in this execution, then to me, everyone in the room has a right to tune out. That's not, the conversation needs to be around aligning brand strategy to business strategy. And here's why this execution is on strategy. Here's why it's doing the thing that we said it needed to do. And here's the business case for that. That's how the work has to be couched. If you're presenting and talking about preference, or it feels good, or I like it, or my mom likes it, then they're also well within the right to be like, well, my mom doesn't, or I don't. And I think those conversations have to be like, those are not boardroom table conversations.
Yeah, it's interesting where you go from subjective to objectives, right?
Yeah.
And how do you, the CFO is not going to be in every, marketing strategy meeting. So how do you, when does the CFO come in, and how do you convince, let's say, your client who has to deliver these line items to a CFO? When do you go in and, be the hero for your client to help, sell an idea, whether it's, brand or even just creative, let's say like a 30-second spot or something like that. When can you go in without stepping on anyone's toes and become the hero to help your client pitch this line item, so to speak, to a CFO?
Literally, we will go in, our agency will go in whenever, from the get-go, to sort of frame the ask and say, here's why the investment matters, and here's outcomes that we think we can expect based off this investment. Happy to have those conversations up front. And then also, we're often working with management and boards and making sure that everyone has a clear understanding of what we're doing and why. And we spend like one of my favorite lines when we're pitching new clients is to talk about, our expertise working in complicated stakeholder environments and designing process around complicated stakeholder environments. Like that's our first act of creative is what I always say is every stakeholder environment is going to be different and we need a creative process to manage your different stakeholders. And, there's just there's way more communication that has to happen than anyone thinks is going to have to happen. And in my experience, we spend so much more time getting organizations ready for great creative. Like that's 75% of the conversation, and the 25% is, okay, here's the creative and here's why. Because you have to prime them and everyone has to understand why in order to accept, oh yeah, okay, this does make sense and we will execute on this and we will invest.
You've got a lot of experience having done this too. And I wonder, in your experience, are there potholes that you've stepped in along the way that you're like, oh, I learned from that one. I should never do that again. Just in terms of whether it's jargon or the process that's like a surefire killer for a deal or creative concept.
Yeah. I've stepped in so many potholes. I think one thing I will not do now is go into any board meeting. To me, board meetings are performance. We are rehearsing well in advance, and I don't want anything being new news in a board meeting. So if we're presenting, big brand changes, new name, new visual identity, that to whoever is appropriate to do that on management. Sometimes it's me with the CEO. Sometimes it's members of our team with, a VP or whomever is meeting with members of the board, like a few key members, the chair, if there's a committee, and presenting the work and saying, hey, here's where we're at. We're usually not asking for opinions at that point. We want a blessing. So that when that board meeting actually plays out, we know, we've already whipped the vote. Everyone already knows more or less what's happening and why, and they've had a chance to have conversations about it. So I have not done that before, and it has gone terribly. I've been in board meetings where they asked management to leave the room, and then they were just interrogating us about why did you
No
make
way.
Gosh,
really?
Yes, why did you make
that sounds comfortable.
Oh my gosh, it's horrendous, and you feel it was awful. And I was like, oh, I'm never doing this again.
Yeah, that's super interesting because, the management should be the champions, your champions, right? So, they've hired, they're the ones who hired you, not the board, I'm assuming. So how do you justify their decision to do something like that? Or how do they justify that?
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, every board composition is different, and there's different levels of maturity on boards. I think you really have to understand governance and how corporations work and what's their mandate. So, they have a financial responsibility to the business. So when you're talking to boards, you have to frame it that way. They have a mandate to do right by the business that they're operating on behalf of. So I think when marketers can really understand how corporations function and how they make money and how their governance works, then you start understanding where you play and how to speak to them. But because they don't really know where we fit in or when to use us or who we should be talking to, the onus is on us to educate and say, hey, we're advisors. You need us for this, and this.
Do you think, just going back to the opening question that Derek had for you about your role, do you think it's made you better in those scenarios to be the CEO now and the focus on being the CEO as opposed to the creative director who was doing all kinds of things? I'm sure you had a lot of different hats on, but now more focused on the P&L as an example. Does that help you more now, do you think, in those scenarios?
Yes, I get my way so much more. Because, when you're a creative director, you can know that things are, you have an intuitive sense of this will work, but for a lot of my career, I lacked the language to explain why. But I did feel very convicted that I was right. And then I had enough wins where I saw the relationship between, we put together this really distinct, evocative brand with a weird name, and it was a really big pill for the CEO to swallow. And then I see the financial, 4 years later, I'm like, oh man, you sold for like a very high multiplier, and I know that the brand was cited in the purchase. So I have enough of those where I'm like, right, I know that doing the distinct work, being evocative, helping people feel things when they encounter your brand leads to better financial outcomes. But for so much of my career, I didn't have the language to articulate that. So you're frustrated in meetings. You're like, well, just trust me. Like, I know that this is the right thing to do. But of course, that's not a fair position to put anyone across the table in. So really understanding how business works, understanding what is driving margin, because usually there's depending on the complexity of the business, there's really a place where margin is made, and you have this drives a lot of revenue, but really here's where margin is. And then, okay, let's make sure that what's brand's role in this, and is it to drive even more margin, and then when you start having those conversations, you're much more credible when it comes time to talk to the creative work. And a lot of my role is just paving the path for our creative directors to come in. They understand the strategy, they're presenting the creative work, and the client already knows that this is aligned with where the business needs to go.
That's so interesting. Like, when I think about, let's say, a creative brief that you send to a client to, I don't know, fill out or help fill out, it's typically like, I don't know, what problem are you trying to solve? What's your goals for this campaign? So on and so forth. Who's your audience? So what does your brief look like now? Like, does it have these type of questions within it in terms of margins and all that other, CFO jargon?
You want to usually, okay, because basically, so our strategy, we have a whole strategy arm of the business, and our and to me, what the goal of strategy is actually to translate the business needs. They're the translator. They talk creative to the business, and then they talk business to our creatives. And so that's the strategy muscle, is to make sure that those things are aligned. So in our creative briefs, I probably wouldn't say margin, but we might say something like, there's going to be a price increase and we need to justify this. But I'm not necessarily going to say, this business wants to raise margins overall. I'd probably frame it a bit differently for a creative audience, if that makes sense.
Yeah, totally. And just thinking, as an extension of that, I love how you phrase that about speaking business to the creatives and vice versa, the creative to the business. There's so much, especially on the media side, there's so much data. And on the business side, there's tons of data and reports and the sort of spreadsheet approach to management kind of thing. And it applies to marketing a lot of times too. But then you have this creative idea or concept that you're pitching them, and it doesn't fit nicely into a cell. How do you communicate some of those ideas in a way that is understandable for people that don't get creative necessarily, other than that it's pink, or I don't know, it's got a character in it, or it's got our logo. Where's our logo? Make it bigger, make it bigger, make it bigger.
Yeah. A lot of that I rely on psychology. I think Mark, you and I have talked about Daniel Kahneman and System 1 and System 2 thinking. And oftentimes, it's people don't want to be distinct or stand out. That's really important for survival. We have to fit in. So when you're showing a CEO a new brand, or you're showing them a campaign, if it's going to be effective, they need to feel pretty nervous. If that work is going to work in the world, they have to feel like, oh my God, I am standing apart from the herd now, because we know that distinctiveness is a key component of good creative. If it's not distinctive, it's not going to be effective. But in the room, when you're presenting work to somebody and he or she is looking at this and thinking, oh my God, like I have to own this on my business card. You know, my neighbors know who I work for. They're going to know that I'm behind this campaign and it is so different than what is out there. Like there's fear that's really, really normal that shows up because we're meant to belong so we can survive. So talking them through that process before it happens is really important. And oftentimes I'll
Such
say,
a good point.
if you don't feel like slightly sick to your stomach, if you're not like, if your heart rate didn't rise a little bit, then I didn't do my job. And, you know, there's usually a point where somebody, like sometimes it's me, but sometimes it's somebody on our brand team gets a phone call from the CEO or whoever. And the phone call is the kind of like, just level with me. Should I actually be doing this? Like, are you sure? Are you sure? You know? And then it's our job to say, like, I don't have a crystal ball. Like, I don't know what the future holds, but I can tell you from experience, if we don't stand out, if we're not different, then this definitely won't work. So,
Yeah.
you know, all of my training, all of my experience, all of the science says, yes, we should be distinctive in this moment, and it isn't going to feel good, or it's going to feel a bit bad.
So many things that you just said that I could see why you don't want to surprise people at the board meeting, at a pitch, because then the fear leads to a couple potential reactions. Some of them aren't good, like fight or flight. You don't want either of those. You want embrace with that idea at that point. And the risk part, the way you frame risk is so interesting, because I'd never thought about it really that way, where the idea itself, if it's not like everyone else, it's risky. And business doesn't want risk. They want more certainty. Which is a hard thing for me to articulate. That's really interesting, the way you said that. It's so good.
Yeah, branding, the riskiest thing you can do in branding is to not take a risk. That is the easiest way to lose money, is to not stand out.
Look like everybody else.
Yeah, but it's so not what we're trying to do. Like, we just are not practice. We're not, and it's one of the few instances in life where you actually must be distinct in order to succeed. So it is hard. I really have a lot of empathy for our clients and those moments, and you know, they often do lose sleep and they feel a little, you know, renaming a business, all these things, like they feel afraid, and I feel they should. I get it, and it's hard, and they have to do it anyways.
Yeah.
That's it's a conversation that not a lot of folks can have with people, because it's just like, I don't know. It's like, let's say, like, I don't know, you're a nutrition coach or whatever, and you're just like, hey, eat more and you'll lose weight. Well, it sounds like very counterproductive, but it's true. The more you eat, the more you lose. Apparently, that's what I've heard. So it's like, yeah, when you kind of talk about something that might be so unorthodox from what folks are used to when we think about safe bet, does that give you any anxiety as somebody who has to pitch these ideas to someone? Like, does it give you kind of like, oh shoot, maybe they're right? Or do you just have to No,
I get the feeling too. I also get afraid. I don't want to embarrass anyone or wreck anyone's business or have the, you know, I don't want a client to spend $1 million or $2 million on this campaign and have this TV commercial playing across Canada, and then it's like, oh God, we're so embarrassed. Like, I really don't want that on my conscience either. So I also have to do the work of, you know, silencing that fear. And it's funny because branding and advertising works on system one, right? Like, we create feelings in people, but then in order to actually do the work, I have to do my system two. I have to think about it. I can't feel my way through
Yeah.
branding. I have to be thinking like, yeah, okay, this is different. I do feel afraid. This is out there. It's a little weird. This is whatever. And I know that's the right choice to make. So
Mm-hmm.
it's sort of these mere processes that are happening, which are hard to manage sometimes.
Yeah.
So just on that idea, like to manage a client, now that you've kind of like unleashed this idea of risk, I wonder if you could just talk a little bit more about managing risk from a creative perspective, because you've, like, as we said, it's hard to measure some of these good ideas. And so then how do you get buy-in then when you've got I always think about organizations like an organism. Like they tend to reject new novel ideas like a virus.
Mm-hmm.
There's antibodies that attack it. So how do you get that buy-in to something that is typically not in their normal language, and then shepherd an idea through so it doesn't become totally unlike what the original intent was?
Yeah, I learned this from, I forget, I was at a conference and they said they were just talking about logos, but he did sports branding or something, but he was saying I actually show the logo on like 100 different mock-ups at the beginning of the presentation, and his thing is you can only go in with one logo. That's like, here's your logo, and then he would show it 100 times, and he was like, familiarity breeds comfort, which is true. That is sort of the antidote. Like, it's, if you show something once, it was new and novel, and now we're going to talk about it right away. That doesn't work. There's a process to letting clients become familiar with the unfamiliar, and to me, don't present online, present in person. And the creative director really needs to take their time. And, if we have like 90 minutes to present a brand identity, I want them talking for 45 to 50 minutes about 3 concepts and really getting into the details, and always linking it back to strategy. But we have a lot of patience for, speak to the typeface and all of this. And for those 45 to 50 minutes, like, I guarantee the client that we're presenting to, they are not paying attention to this is why we chose this color and this is they are not. They are thinking, they're going through their mind like the risk register of, okay, what about this, what about this? Like, I can watch them have those reactions, but they're still seeing it. It's coming back, it's coming back, it's coming back. So the goal being that during that process, they've actually, like, we've created the space for it to feel more familiar. And then there's another round 2 presentation where we're showing the same thing again, but maybe we've evolved it. We create that familiarity with them, which helps them get over the discomfort.
Yeah.
They had.
So interesting.
Yeah. It's crazy
It's
that
such
you're
a
like
delicate dance to get it through all the hoops and everything, and like the fears and manage that and still come out the other end of it with an idea that resembles something that was true to the original spirit of the concept, probably.
It is, I would say, harder than doing great creative. The stakeholder engagement, the client management, all of that is more sophisticated and more nuanced than it. Well, I shouldn't say that, but they're equally hard things to do. And but you put the effort towards both, not just one.
Sure. Yeah.
Yeah, it's interesting. It's like you're marketing within the marketing ideas, right? It's like you it's not even selling an idea anymore. You're basically marketing your idea. Can we go back to the CFO component? When they're demanding, let's say, short-term results for the most part, how do you protect your creative budgets when they're in such demand? Especially when we talk about brand, it takes quite a bit of time to show any sort of result, right? So, how do you kind of protect your creative budget when the CFO demands immediate short-term results?
To be honest, I was thinking about that. Usually we walk away. Like I've had home builders tend to be. I have amazing home builder clients right now, but I've worked with uh, every home builder over the course of my career, and they tend to manage brand, in my opinion, very poorly. And often, what'll happen is, and there's margin pressure, and then there's a competitor across the street, and then the only tool they have left is discounting, and they're like, we have to get 200 people through the showroom this weekend, make it happen. And I'm like, you want to what, like, maybe we can, like, there's a great radio, what, like, there are things that we can do, but to be honest, it's just not, there's so, like, the time and the investment is at the wrong juncture. I'm like, give me that budget at the beginning. It's compound interest. Let's invest up front. Let's do long-term thinking. Let's do long-term planning. Let's go on a 3-year journey. Let's be ambitious about the growth of the business, wildly ambitious. Let's not try to have, I don't want, winning this quarter is not the job of brand. It just isn't. And I don't want to play there, and it's not fun for anybody. Whereas if you're working with an organization that is thinking strategically, they're thinking in, like, they have conversations, maybe they're not planning the next decade, but they're thinking in these longer scopes, you really can be part of the thing that catapults them to another zero and another zero and another zero. And brand is magic in that way. So I always feel sad when I'm like, I don't want to use this at the end to do small things. I'm like, let's use it really well at the beginning to do huge things the way it was meant to. It's like those short wins that I don't think they really exist, and maybe you can eke one out, but it's not strategic, and I don't like it.
Yeah. Oh, there's so many questions I want to ask you about. I know we're running out of time. So maybe just, if you don't mind, one other question, Steph, real quick. Are there, along the same lines as potholes, maybe, is there language where you just see just more of a fun thing, where you've seen either in your past and hit repeatedly, or you've seen other people pitch where they just get a ton of eye rolls? Like, I'm thinking about marketing gobbledygook that we all hear, like we talk about tofu, like top of funnel as an example. I always think that's a funny one, but I don't know, when you're talking to a board, do they see that as funny language, or do they go, oh no, I get it, yeah, tofu?
I don't, I've definitely seen that and experienced it, and media tends, like, those are not always, but oftentimes that's when my eyes start to glaze over, and it's like CTRs and video completion rates and all these, like, these sort of metrics that I think really get put at the forefront of the conversation and shouldn't be. Like, let's talk about the actual thing that you're trying to achieve, not the things that you think happened before that, supposedly. Yeah, so but we try not to do a lot of that, and I'm not a detailed person, so if I can't understand the general concepts of it, then I don't know it well enough, and so then I have to learn it well enough. And whenever we're talking to a board or a client, it should be pretty simple. Like, my 12-year-old should also generally be able to grasp it. Otherwise, I don't think we've done a good job. Otherwise, we don't really understand what we're doing. Like, if you can't explain it to me in plain language, I don't believe you anyways.
Yeah, that's good. That's a good point.
Yeah, I know Mark hates the funnel language anyways, so. Yeah, okay. So one more question before we call it a day. I guess, when let's say you're pitching something to a director of some sort or a CFO, before you pitch, a big ambitious campaign, something crazy that you think is so different from anything else, to, let's say, a financial team, what's the single most, critical slide or argument that you need to include to keep that idea from getting killed?
Oh, that's tough, Derek. I have so many. I think it's something I just say over and over again is brand is an investment and also an insurance policy. It's like, so as long as we couch this idea in brand, when it's done well, and even when it's not done that well, has a multiplier effect across the whole organization. And even if you're speaking to a CFO, like they understand how enterprise value is calculated. So it's an EBITDA and then it's a multiplier. It's actually very, very hard for most businesses to meaningfully raise EBITDA. You have to do a lot of things operationally very well to eke more margin out of a business if you're trying to sell it. But your EBITDA multiplier, a lot easier. And that's really where brand works. So I'm like, that number that your enterprise value is going to be comprised of? Well, you could work forever hard and try to create more margin, or we can make your business, like give it a better reputation. It's a little sexier. People want to work there. People know who you are. They pick up the phone when you call. And then when you go to sell it, or if not, we can raise the enterprise value by raising that EBITDA multiplier. And that's a lot easier, in my opinion, to do. And so when you start having those conversations and they understand that you're contemplating the same things that they contemplate day in and day out, and you're presenting a tool that does that, they listen, because they're like, yeah, that is actually what I want. I want to create more enterprise value, or maybe it is margin or whatever. But then
it's probably not a CTR.
Yes, that's right. They don't care.
Yeah.
Like, and I don't want, why? Like, it was a great CTR. Who cares? Like, don't talk to me about that. So I think for me, it's changed my life learning how to talk to them about the things that matter to them. Because when you do that, then they start to listen back. But if you don't speak their language, they're never going to learn how to speak yours.
Right.
In my experience.
Yeah. And for those folks who are listening who don't know what EBITDA stands for, I believe it stands for everybody's bullshitting investors through dubious accounting or something like that, or advertising. I'm not sure, but I believe that's what it is. But shows how much I know about business. Thank you so much, Steph. This is an awesome conversation. I think, when we look at the CMA and some of the problems that everyone's trying to solve within the organization or within the community, it's selling an idea to folks who are more on the financial side of things, and we really appreciate you coming on to talk to us about it.
Thanks so much for having me.
Thanks, Steph.